Jake had spent years building his ranch into the place he called home. Every fence, barn, and tree carried memories that mattered to him. He never imagined that leaving town for 7 days would change everything. Because while Jake was gone, the HOA decided his property was theirs to destroy. Before leaving town, Jake double-checked the locks and security cameras. He had 1 week of business meetings scheduled several hours away. The ranch would be empty, but everything was secured and legally documented. Jake believed he had nothing to worry about. Jake drove away that morning, without knowing what was waiting for him. His ranch disappeared behind him as the road stretched toward town. Meanwhile, someone at the HOA office was already making plans. Plans that would turn his peaceful ranch into a disaster zone. Victoria Hayes had always believed Jake's ranch was an eyesore beside the community. She wanted the land cleared for a future development project. But Jake had repeatedly refused every offer they made, so Victoria decided to stop asking. By the second day, heavy equipment arrived at Jake's property. The contractors claimed they had authorization from the HOA. Nobody stopped to verify who actually owned the land, and Victoria personally ordered them to begin demolition. The first fence came down before anyone questioned the paperwork. Then the bulldozers moved deeper onto Jake's property. Victoria watched his years of work disappear beneath heavy machinery. She believed Jake would have no choice but to accept defeat. Then the crew reached Jake's house. They tore through the porch, walls, and roof with shocking speed. By sunset, the home Jake had built was reduced to rubble, and nobody had even called him. For 7 days, Jake had no idea what was happening back home. The ranch that once stood proudly now looked like a disaster zone. Victoria thought the destruction would make the land easier to control. Instead, she had created the biggest legal mistake of her life. On the 7th evening, Jake finally received an urgent phone call. The caller told him something had happened at his ranch. Jake immediately opened the security footage sent to his phone. What he saw made him freeze. Jake watched his house disappear piece by piece on the screen. He watched Victoria standing there as if she owned the place. His hands tightened around the edge of the table. Then he quietly said, "They just made a very expensive mistake." Jake pulled out the original deed to his ranch. He checked the property survey and every recorded boundary document. Everything clearly showed that the HOA had no ownership rights over his land. Jake knew exactly what he needed to do next. Before sunrise, Jake was already driving home. He barely stopped except to fuel the truck and make phone calls. By the time he reached his county, his attorney was already waiting. But Jake wanted to see the destruction with his own eyes. Jake stepped out of his truck and stared silently at the ruins. The house was gone, the fence was destroyed, and the yard was torn apart. For a moment, he simply stood there remembering everything that had been lost. Then he noticed something that changed the entire case. A buried survey marker proved the demolition had crossed far beyond the HOA boundary. Jake's attorney photographed every inch of it. The evidence showed the bulldozers had destroyed private property without permission, and that meant Victoria had a serious problem. Victoria arrived expecting Jake to be furious, but powerless. Instead, Jake calmly held up the original deed. He told her every square foot of the destroyed property belonged to him. Victoria's confident expression suddenly disappeared. The sheriff examined the deed and compared it with the official county survey. The boundaries were unmistakable. The bulldozers had demolished Jake's house without legal authority. Now the sheriff had to decide what happened next. Victoria tried claiming the HOA had authorized the demolition. The sheriff asked her one simple question: "Where's the court order?" Victoria had no answer. That silence changed the entire atmosphere. Victoria finally realized the HOA paperwork could not protect her. The contractors had acted on instructions that were never legally valid. Jake's attorney immediately filed an emergency lawsuit, and the damages were about to become enormous. Days later, both sides faced Judge Eleanor Grant in court. Victoria expected the case to become another minor property dispute, but Jake's attorney presented video evidence, deeds, surveys, invoices, and photographs. The courtroom became completely silent. The judge carefully reviewed every document placed before her. The evidence showed the HOA had no authority over Jake's ranch. The demolition had been deliberate, extensive, and completely unauthorized. Then the judge announced that the court would calculate the full damages.